breaking news this afternoon that the suspect accused of carrying out last weekend's massacre at the Walmart in El Paso, Texas, was specifically targeting Mexicans. That's according to law enforcement officials earlier today. And that confirmation comes on the same day that Donald Trump promises, as he did after the Parkland shooting, to do something on guns despite being warned not to by the NRA.
I have a lot of respect for the people at the NRA. And I have already spoken to them on numerous occasions. And frankly, we need intelligent background checks, okay?
Welcome words if they prove true, but we've heard those words before from this president. In the wake of the tragic mass shooting that killed 14 high school students and 3 adults in Parkland, Florida. Here's the president after that shooting.
We'll be doing very strong background checks. Very strong emphasis on the mental health of somebody, and we are going to do plenty of other things. It's not going to be talk like it has been in the past. It's been going on too long, too many instances, and we're going to get it done.
Associated Press is out with a fact check of that promise after Parkland for very strong background checks. AP writes this, quote, Trump later retreated, expressing support for modest changes to the federal background check system and for arming teachers. And here's the truth about Trump's record on guns. The president actually threatened to veto bipartisan background check legislation. The president scrapped a rule making it harder for some mentally ill individuals to own guns, and he's shown little to no interest in stronger measures such as an assault weapons ban. The bottom line? Skeptics have every justification for their pessimism when it comes to Donald Trump, his allies in Congress, and the stranglehold that the NRA holds over both. Here's Congressman Tim Ryan on claims by Republicans that legislation on gun control will soon be front and center.
That sounds like a Potomac two-step to me. I mean, their playbook, Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, the National Rifle Association, their playbook has always been, how do we slow walk this? How do we mealy mouth it until it goes away, until the news cycle changes, until something happens in the world or something happens in America or there's a natural disaster, and then the story goes back on the back burner. And I think that's what Trump's saying. Oh, we'll have this conversation. We'll have that. We don't want to have it now. We don't want to do it now. We don't want to call the Senate back to deal with this now. And that's the problem, John. That's the problem that the American people are fed up with. And now people are starting to pay attention.
And that is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. From the Washington Post, White House Bureau Chief Phil Rucker is back. Joyce Vance, former U.S. Attorney. Here at the table, the Rev Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC. Also the president of the National Action Network. Maria Teresa Kumar is here, president and CEO of Voto Latino. And Bloomberg Opinion executive editor, fresh off a Twitter brawl with the president himself, Tim O'Brien's back. All our guests, lucky for us, MSNBC contributors. Phil Rucker, let me start with you. I think we are all accustomed to the president saying things that have no attachment to the truth or reality. But when he says we're going to do something on gun control, whether you love Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump, the vast majority of Americans hope that's true.
Yeah, Nicole, the polling is completely lopsided on this issue. 90% of Americans think background checks is the way to go. They have thought that for years, and yet nothing has happened here in Washington. The president said today he wants intelligent background checks. That's his word, intelligent, but it's not clear what that really means. And I think the devil is going to be in the details. What is this legislation? Is it going to be the Manchin-Toomey bill of a few years back that died in the Senate during the Obama presidency? Is it going to be something different, perhaps something even weaker that would be, more appealing to the Republicans in the Senate? And it's unclear also how much momentum President Trump is willing to put behind it. He said what he said today at the White House, but he said it as he was departing for a week-long vacation at his golf club in New Jersey. The Senate is out for the entire month of August, so it's not clear where the leadership and momentum to do something is going to come from in the next few days. days.
Joyce, if you've got 80 or 90% of the American people behind something, you actually have some cross pressure for this president among his base. That includes some people in the Trump base. And Phil Rucker said the devil's in the details. A lot of people think the devil's in the NRA and their grip on Congress. Here's something that's happened on gun policy since Trump has been president. Politico writes, Trump quietly used regulations to expand gun access. Federal agencies have implemented more than half a dozen policy changes that primarily through little notice regulatory moves expand access to guns by lifting firearms bans in certain locations and limiting the names in the national database designed to keep firearms away from dangerous people. So he talks about intelligent background checks. He's done some very, very profound things to weaken checks and balances and limits on guns getting in the hands of, by this reporting, dangerous people.
Right, and I think we're also surprised to see that he's talking out of both sides of his mouth on this issue. You know, the reality here is law enforcement has almost uniformly believed for maybe as long as I was in the Justice Department, over 25 years, that universal background checks were sort of a no-brainer, because right now, if you buy a gun at a gun show or online or through a person-to-person transfer, there's no background check. And that's how a lot of the guns that get used in significant violent crimes are sold. So the House has a bill, H.R. 8, that would close those loopholes. There are also issues with how long it takes to do checks and with the law permitting sales to go through if those checks aren't completed within the mandatory 72-hour period. Some states make it a little bit longer. But here again, the president is at fault, where he could have put the resources into FBI and ATF so that they could complete those background checks. Instead, those resources are slowly disappearing. There's no real reason to believe that the president has a commitment. There's no specific plan on the table, even though there are a lot of options.
I want to dive into the news that broke this afternoon that the law enforcement has confirmed that the killer's motive was to kill Mexicans. And I want to dive into all of Trump's language on guns, because he's blamed everything from, arcade games to, bad moods, but or mental illness and unhappy people. But I want you to tell me, I want you to explain to me sort of the organization of Donald Trump's brain, because I remember Donald Trump during the campaign at the NRA convention. And we didn't pull that out, but he was, I think, the first and the earliest person endorsed by the NRA. He has been so proud and happy to be as aligned with the NRA as he is. He has talked about it as though it is, in his mind, a great political accomplishment to be as synced up with the NRA as he is. But you play the video after Parkland, and I remember that event. I remember watching that event. You play the video today on Departure, where in his words, no more talk. I called Mitch. He was waiting for my call. We're going to do something. What do you think, using your predictive powers, what happens next?
I don't think he's going to lift a hand at all on background checks. I don't think he cares about it morally. I don't think he cares about it as policy, and I don't think he cares in any way about the victims of the shootings. He looks at this very narrowly, that he likes the fact that the NRA came out for him early when he began running. He mentioned it again on the White House lawn today. He sees that as a matter of loyalty and nothing else. He recognizes that the NRA has essentially become the piggy bank of the GOP. They give exclusively to Republican candidates and Republican office holders. He likes that about them. And when you ask to explain the organization of his mind, there is no organization. Inside his mind, there's a putter, a cheeseburger, someone else's credit card, and a porn video. And the rest of it is just an empty space where he's figuring out how he can occupy center stage and meet these other needs he has that are very self-centered and self-involved. He's not sophisticated about policy. He's never thought it through. He said a year ago, in February of 2018, he told the members of the GOP in the Oval Office, "You're scared of the NRA," implying that he wasn't, and that they were going to get background checks put through after Parkland. And about 2 days after that meeting, Chris Cox of the NRA came to the White House, and poof, it disappeared. That's the power of the NRA. Now, since then, Cox is gone. The NRA is in disarray. There's, smoking corruption scandals in there. there's a possibility the NRA lacks the kind of muscles to flex that they once did. But I'm very pessimistic about the idea that Mitch McConnell is suddenly going to step back and Donald Trump is suddenly going to see the light and the NRA is going to be inconsequential. This is money and guns. It's not a moral issue for the people who need to change it.
Is Donald Trump afraid of the NRA?
Donald Trump coddles the NRA. Yeah, Donald Trump loves the NRA. Donald Trump has no reason to be afraid of it because he sees them as an ally. And at the end of the day, his policies are going to be lined up with the NRA's.
Let me show you all the things that Donald Trump has attributed this epidemic of gun violence to in his career.
Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun. We must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace.
Bad guys aren't giving up their guns. And you're not going to be giving up your guns either.
If we had guns in California on the other side where the bullets went in the different direction, you wouldn't have 14 or 15 people dead right now. If even in Paris, if they had guns on the other side going in the opposite direction, you wouldn't have 130 people plus dead.
If they knew there were guns in the room, it might not have happened.
Maria.
Where do you start? When you have a presidential candidate that says, I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it, he encompasses what violence means. And it's not the video games. And this idea that you throw the reason that someone pulls the trigger at the feet of someone that is suffering from mental illness, hate is not a mental illness. And we have a perpetrator right now in the White House that does not want to take responsibility for their words, for his words. He descended from that escalator almost 4 years ago, specifically saying that Mexicans were criminal and rapists. Every single Latino in this country heard that dog whistle. We knew exactly that he was talking about. And the fact that we didn't take him more seriously as a country is why we're here with him, because of the moment that he helped create. And now he wants to absolve himself. And he is not someone that is faithful to any group. Right now, there is rumblings that the NRA is in disarray. What is he doing? He's asking his advisors, how strong are they really? Because he also recognizes that the American people are so fed up that this might be an actual watershed moment, that he may do the right thing only to save himself a re-election.
To the point about this being something that he stated, I mean, I think Beto O'Rourke's done a good job at putting this back on the media this week. Stop asking questions you know the answer to. Donald Trump announced his candidacy, branding, if you will, Mexicans as rapists and murderers. We now have law enforcement today confirming that the killer's intended target, was Mexicans. A lot of language overlap between the president's Twitter feed and the killer's message. What is sort of the basic question that Democrats take to the country?
I think when you have the law enforcement release a statement today that the shooter, we don't have to guess about it, the shooter's saying he was targeting Mexicans, it is a hate crime. So all of this hogwash the president is talking about video games and other things, hogwash. This guy did not say I was watching video games. He did not say any of the excuses the president gave. He said I came at Mexicans. Who has been the orator of trying to demonize and denigrate Mexicans? Donald Trump. Go fast forward. Today, Donald Trump, who is brash and demanding, says, I talked to Mitch on the phone. Not that I told Mitch to get back here to Washington and have a special session. Not that I said the Senate ought to be doing this and break a day in their recess. And by the way, I'm on my way to the Hamptons to a fundraiser. Hurry up, because I've got to get out there and pick up some money. And then I'm going on an extended vacation. But trust me, even though I've lied to you every time before, trust me, after my vacation and my golfing, and after Mitch gets finished in Kentucky, we're going to do this. And what are we going to do? We're going to do background checks. We're not even going to talk about assault weapons. The fact of the matter is that this whole tape you played, where he says if they know guys are in there with a gun, they won't come, they came. Walmart is in a carry state. There was no way that 21-year-old didn't know people in that Walmart didn't have guns. They sell guns in Walmart. He didn't care anyway. He came in and started shooting, knowing somebody could have taken a gun off the rack and shot back. He was so full of hate and determined to do it. We are in a state of emergency, and we have a president that's on his way to the Hamptons and into the golf course.
You're on the show every week. We have a lot of conversations about Donald Trump. You, along with Tim, are one of the coolest customers in just knowing what you're seeing, predicting what you're going to see before you see it. And I think you're speaking to the anger in this country that's boiling over, not just around the question of guns, but around this question of our complacency around race.
And I think that we are co-signing it by ducking it. We're talking about a president that called a group of people based on their nationality rapist. We're talking about a president that said that those African nations and Haiti were S-hole countries. We're talking about a president whose lawyer and someone he said was like his son sat in front of Congress under oath and said, the president said, have you ever seen a black person run anything, any country that worked? He is a white supremacist by his own statements and by the witnesses of his own lawyers. So why are we dancing around this, trying to be, analytical? What are we looking at? You're looking at what you're seeing. Let's do something about it.
And Nicole, I think to underscore it, it's not just his rhetoric, because we get lost on the terrible things he says. It is his policies, the policies that he is actually underscoring. The fact that one of the first things that he did when he was president was to actually create a Muslim ban. That had hundreds of thousands of people in the street saying, not on our watch. He put in a citizenship question where we have the receipts showing that it was to disenfranchise the American Latino vote. We have children dying in cages. It's a litany. He created a denaturalization task force, and the list keeps going on and on. It's like, how much more do we need to show the American people that this man is not, he's not a unifier. He is weaponizing race over being American. When you talk about this idea of a majority-minority country, when we talk about minorities, we have this vision in our country that we're talking about a real small fraction of us. No, it's 40% of us. It's 132 million people strong, and we need all of us to come together, because you know who else is in his ear? The Russians. And the Russians know that the stronger we are as a unified voice, then it's harder for them to actually resurrect themselves. And right now, the Russians, what they're trying to do is they're trying to resurrect themselves at any cost, and they found someone in Donald Trump to do that work for them.
And we can't be bullied. I need to just say this quickly, because I know he's going through the Twitter war. I went through it last week with the president. He needs to know, and the Democrats need to show they're not going to be bullied. I mean, he says, I'm a racist, yet we've been friends 25 years. Well, what did he have on, blackface when I used to see him for 25 years? I knew you were white, Mr. Trump, so how was I racist? But that's the kind of stuff he gets away with. We need to stand up to him and make him stand up for the country, or we need to get another president.
Phil Rucker, I see some signs of there's no way to spin your way out of being so politically rigid. And the rigidity in his politics suggests to me that he knows he's a hostage of the NRA. The president doesn't have any wiggle room on guns because he can't walk away from them. That's a sign of political weakness. The president on Air Force One between stops in Dayton and El Paso lashing out at Biden. It's more than just Biden getting under his skin. Biden stood at a teleprompter and delivered a speech that if everyone heard it every single day, I'm pretty sure that message, whether it's Joe Biden or whomever prevails in the Democratic primary, would prevail among all those kind of suburban women in Lake County, Ohio, the kinds of places that tip Trump over the edge. He is in a politically perilous place. Does he know that?
He does, Nicole, and I think that's why he's been lashing out so much, and not only at Biden, but at Tim and all sorts of other people this week, because he's angry that he is being blamed in part for this shooting in El Paso. He's angry that, decades of stoking racial divisions and in some cases outright racist comments and actions are coming now to haunt him in a profound way. It's not, this is a label that could stick for him. It could be defining in the 15 months between now and the election as voters sort of form their opinions about whether to give him another 4 years, this label of racist and racism. And so that's a danger. But, some of Trump's advisors also think it could work to their advantage, that there's a danger here in the Democrats politicizing this too much. I'm just telling you what they say.
I believe you.
That there is a danger.
I've worked on a few presidential campaigns, and I don't give out. My political advice is worth what people pay for it, nothing. something, but racism not a way to the victory.
Well, there's a strategy here in sowing these racial divides, which is why the president did those tweets about the Squad, the 4 congresswomen of color, a few weeks back, and his advisors are trying to argue that by calling Trump a racist, by focusing on racism, the Democrats could potentially turn off Trump voters and Trump supporters. We'll see if that pans out.
So you
I'm
woke
not the
up.
strategist they are.
No. You woke up the political operative in me, and I think just at a strategic level, the political strategy, and it's disgusting, but the strategy is to paint the Democratic Party is extreme in their policies, but race, and I don't know what they tell the toddler in chief, but the actual politics of being thought of as a racist are devastating in swing counties. I think the strategy, and again, it's disgusting, but at its best, its conception is to paint the entire Democratic Party as extreme in their policies, and the president wanted to use those women to do it. But I saw some of the reporting, I think Axios has it, that they think being called a white supremacist really does suit them. Are they really digging in and comfortable with that, Phil?
Well, the reality, Nicole, is they don't really have an option here because the president's not going to apologize. The president's not going to take back what he said. He has never apologized really for anything. So, you know, they've got to try to argue their way out of this and come out on the other side and look for some light at the end of this tunnel. But it is a very difficult political moment for Donald Trump.
Joyce, can you just take me inside what being Chris Wray was like this week? He testified on the 23rd, I believe, of July, and a lot of that got lost in Robert Mueller's testimony the next day or a couple days later. And he testified that domestic terrorism is a threat and that the greatest cause of domestic terrorism is white supremacy. You now have 6 of the 20 or 21 Democratic candidates for president describing Donald Trump as a white supremacist. What does the worldview inside law enforcement look like right now? And how much is the president's speech, whether they can do anything about it or not, of concern?
You know, it's tough to be Chris Wray, the director of the FBI, or anyone in law enforcement right now, because on the one hand, you understand there is now data that suggests that nationalist terrorism, domestic terrorism, is not just on the rise, but it is the leading cause of terrorist activity in this country, that virtually all of the cases the FBI is investigating come from that threat stream. And yet at the same time, you've got the man in the White House who's your boss, and he is, if not openly advocating for it, then refusing to walk it back. And you know, here's the easy path forward for Donald Trump. If you don't want to see violence, if you don't want people to think that you're a racist, then you simply say, I am not calling for a violent solution. No one should do that in my name. Trump's failure to do that makes law enforcement's job very tough.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.